Welcome to Quiz Time. I'm your quiz master, Sean, and I've got 100 questions for you about retro slang. So let's see what we know, what we remember, give our brains a workout, and remember, this keeps us young. All right, question number 1. The term sitting in the hot seat is said when someone is very overheated outdoors, getting asked difficult questions, or in the best seat at a concert. Sitting in the hot seat. That means getting asked difficult questions. During the 1950s, what does it mean if you're engaged in back seat bingo? Kiss in the car, when you get out of the car and switch seats at a red light, or play a boring game? That means you're kissing in the car. Another word for a telephone is a sounder, a honk, or a horn. Another word for a telephone. That would be getting on the horn. During the 1960s, if something is out of sight, this means it's forgettable, unbelievable, or does it mean it's creative? If something's out of sight, it's unbelievable. During the 1970s, if someone says they have to skinny, this means they have to use the bathroom, they have to hurry, or they have to get in shape. Someone says they have to skinny, that means they need to hurry. What was another way to give an affirmative response of yes in the 1980s? Big time chia, psych, or punch it? If you're saying yes in the 80s, you could be saying big time chia. During the 1940s, if you cheesed someone, this means you smiled at them, made them a sandwich, or made them angry. If you cheesed someone, that means you made them angry. If someone is a paper shaker, they are, is that a newspaper delivery boy, a cheerleader, or an artist? If they're a paper shaker, that means they are a cheerleader. If something during the 1950s was radioactive, this means it was very popular, or scientific, or athletic. If it was radioactive, that means it was very popular. If you say someone is cooking with helium, you've complimented their driving, dancing, or have you complimented their acting? If you say someone's cooking with helium, you've complimented their dancing. If a person is tooling around, this means to drive around aimlessly, to fix things, or does it mean to create a mess or a problem? If a person is tooling around, that means they're driving around aimlessly. A quicker way to say that you tricked or fooled someone would be sweet, narbo, psych. Which one of those? If you've tricked or fooled someone, it would be psych. What was an odd exclamation that people would say during the 1940s? Christopher Columbus. Or did they say cherry? Or perhaps go bananas? Well, in the 1940s, they might say Christopher Columbus. In the 1970s, a van that is decked out with a bed would be called a sleepin' wagon, or a shaggin' wagon, or a cruisin' wagon. A tricked out VW is a shaggin' wagon. What is another way to say sweet or great, especially during the 80s? Sweet, slay, or confab? In the 80s, it would be sweet. If you made pennies from heaven, what does this mean? You made easy money, you received an inheritance, or you received a blessing. If you received pennies from heaven, you made easy money. To bash ears, that means you talk too much, you're a fighter, or you are a liar. If you bash ears. Well, that would mean you talk too much. In the 1960s, if you chop someone, you hurt them physically, scam them, or cut them down verbally. If you chop someone, well, that means you cut them down verbally. Another word for disgust during the 1980s was it to Betty, to blar, or to bounce? Another word for disgust was you would blar someone. That's such floy would be another way to say that's nonsense, beautiful, or does it mean it's difficult? If it's floy, that means it's nonsense. If a place is referred to as Fat City in the 1950s, it has unhealthy food options, it has rude people, it's a great place. If it's Fat City and we're in the 50s, that means it's a great place. In the 70s, the phrase, "oh yeah, baby," would also be said as panties in a twist, up your nose with a rubber hose, aw, Suki. That would be aw, Suki in the 70s. A cheap restaurant in the 1960s might also be called is it a bean wagon, a 5-finger discount, or take the cake? In the 60s, a cheap restaurant would be called a bean wagon. During the 1970s, to add emphasis to a statement, what phrase would be used? Colder than deuce? Don't have a cow. Or hellacious. If you're going to add emphasis to a statement, it would be colder than deuce. In the 1960s, if someone is sponging, this means they're dancing, they're living off someone else, or they're having fun at a party. If they're sponging, that means they're living off someone else. A humdinger would be defined as, is it a dumb person, an impressive example of something, or a great war? If it's a humdinger, that means an impressive example of something. In the 1950s, if something was a big tickle, this meant, was it a good meal, a waste of time, or very funny? This means it was very funny. An FBI agent during the 1950s might be called would that be a G-man, a T-man, or a wazoo. In the 50s, an FBI agent might be called a G-man. If you ditch a person to hang out with someone cooler in the 1970s, you'd be called a flat-out exit, or a flat lever, or a high and dry lever. If you ditched someone to hang out with someone who was cooler, that made you a flat lever. In the 60s, something that's in mint condition would be called cherry, or it's berry, or perhaps it's peach. In the 60s, something in mint condition would be in cherry condition. A 5-finger discount in the 60s was another way of saying a secret handshake, or is it a high five, or does that mean someone was shoplifting? A 5-finger discount in the 60s meant shoplifting. When a person is sick in the 50s, they would be called, were they cranked, frosted, or were they in Germsville? In the 50s, if they were sick, they would be in Germsville. Punch it in the 60s, you just told a person to get into a fight, start the car, or run a race. If you told them to punch it. That meant to start the car. Go bananas in the 70s, we're letting loose, adding bananas to a recipe, or were we lighting a cigarette if we went go bananas? That meant letting loose. True or false? The Volkswagen Beetle was a popular car during the 1960s and 70s. Another name for it was the slug bug. Is that true or is that false? That's true. Slug bug blue. L7 is another word for is that a fast car, a good movie, or a loser? An L7. That would be a loser. If you want to say something is large or unattractive, which 80s term would you use? Is it Betty, Clydesdale, or tubular? That would be Clydesdale. That party was the joint. Means the party was. Does that mean it was long? Does it mean it was boring? Or does it mean it was awesome? If the party was joint, that meant the party was awesome. The word hacker was originally used during the 1960s for people hacking into, was it telephone networks, television programs, or the first computer? Hacker was used for telephone networks. If you're having a confab, you're having is it a dilemma, a conversation, or are you having an epiphany? If you're having a confab. That means you're having a conversation. If things are going well for you during the 1950s, you might say you're made in the shade, you made the scene, or you're having square biz. In the 50s, if it's going well for you, you got it made in the shade. I'm going fishing is a 1940s way of saying you're going food shopping, going camping, or you're looking for a date. If you're going fishing in the 1940s, that's one way of saying you're looking for a date. In the 80s, if you hung out at the mall a lot, you would have been called were you a store imp, a mall bug, or were you a mall maggot? In the 80s, if you were hanging out at the mall. That would make you a mall maggot. Beat feet was a phrase used in the 1960s to say, was that describing a boxing match, a dance, to dance fast, or to leave quickly? If you're gonna beat feet, that means you're going to get out of here quickly. Are you jiving yet? Is asking if you're relaxed, liking the person you're dating, or are coming to a party. What does it mean if you're asked, are you jiving yet? That means, are you relaxed? Another way to say my house is my pad, my whip, or my sleeper. If we're saying my house. You could be coming over to my pad. In the 1940s, what profession is an anchor clanker? Is it a race car driver? Is it a fishmonger? Or does that describe a sailor? An anchor clanker describes the profession of being a sailor. In the 1950s, someone called a cat is a hip person who is also, is that a bartender, a musician, or someone in the military? If you call the person cat, they're also a musician. Finish the phrase asking someone to dance. Come on, snake. Let's rattle, let's roll, or let's slither. Come on, snake, let's rattle. During the 1960s, a peaceful public gathering focused on meditation was called did we call those groove-ins, love-ins, or dance-ins? Those were called love-ins. In the 1970s, to shut someone up, you would tell them to stop your tongue, close the shades, or close your face. In the 1970s, you want to shut someone up, you told them to close the shades. True or false? Up your nose with a rubber hose was a compliment meaning that something was great. Is that true or false? That's false. It was used as an insult during the 1970s. Another was to say, what's your problem? During the 1950s. That was, what's good? What's your bag? What's the pets? Which one meant, what's your problem in the 1950s? What's your bag? A beat-up old car during the 1950s would be called was that a hunk of junk, a hot rod, or was that a sidecar? A beat-up old car during the 1950s. That was a hunk of junk. In the 1960s, the one-finger salute is another way of saying you gave the middle finger gesture, you grounded your child, or does that mean you're giving someone a kiss? A one-finger salute means you are giving them the middle finger. The bird. You decent is another way of asking someone in the 1970s if they are dressed and ready, or does that mean a nice person or good at an activity? That means, are you dressed and ready? You decent? During the 60s, if you want to say, don't get upset, you could also say, mind your potatoes, don't get your panties in a twist, or don't go floy-floy. Don't get your panties in a twist. In the 70s, a male trying to show off might be referred to as, is he a burger, is he a hot dog, or is he a bean? A male trying to show off in his 70s, we would say he was hot dogging. Narbo in the 80s is another way of saying an idiot, a genius, or a kiss-up. In the 80s, what did we call a narbo? A narbo was someone who was an idiot. In the 50s, eyeglasses were also called, were they called threads, beatniks, or peepers? Eyeglasses in the 50s were also referred to as ones, peepers. In the 1940s, using the term strictly from Dixie would be used to describe the American South, something corny and not cool, or a cool outfit or idea. If it was strictly from Dixie, something corny and not cool. In the 50s, if you're going to make the scene, does that mean you're going to cause an argument? You're going to show up to the event? Or does that mean you're going to host a dinner party? In the 50s, going to make the scene means you're going to show up to the event. This is the pits is a 1960s way of saying this is the worst, or this is the best, or this is a fun time. This is the pits. That means it's the worst. In the 70s, if you were told to mind your potatoes, you should finish your meal, mind your own business, or go have fun. Mind your potatoes means mind your own business. If someone in the 60s shined you on, this meant they ignored you, gave you a black eye, or does it mean they led you on or they lied to you? If they shined on you. If someone shined on you, that meant they ignored you. Musician Bob Dylan was known for which of the following lyrics during the 70s that became a popular phrase? ABC, easy as 1, 2, 3, staying alive, or keep on keeping on? Keep on keeping on. What word means an attractive woman, most likely derived from a character from the Flintstones? A bunny, a dolly, or is she a Betty? She would be a Betty. Someone called a lamb is that someone who's naive, easily outsmarted? Is that a loud, outgoing person? Or is that someone who is small in stature? If someone is called a lamb, that is someone who is naive and easily outsmarted. Flip your lid. This is a 50s way of saying, go crazy, we're going dancing, or take the convertible top off. If If someone is flipped their lid, that means they've gone crazy. If a person is out to lunch, they are, does that mean they went for a long lunch at work? Or they're not smart or comprehending? Or are they playing hooky? If they're out to lunch, that means they're not smart or they're not getting it, not comprehending. If I'm cranked about something, this is a beatnik style of saying I am. Does that mean I'm excited? Does that mean I'm worked up or upset? Or does that mean I'm under the weather or sick? If I'm cranked, that means I'm excited. In the 60s, another way to say beautiful girl was a stone fox, she's a chrome dome, or she's a flower child. A beautiful girl in the 60s would be called a stone fox. Another way to say young boy is that a young blood, a golden ager, or is that a cheeser? A young boy, you might call them a young blood. Hey there, young blood. True or false? Brill was a shortened word for brilliant, commonly used in the 1980s to describe something great. Is that true or is that false? That's true. A term used for a male breakdancer during the 1980s was, do we call him a go-go, a b-boy, or a jumpin' Jill in the 80s? Term for a male breakdancer. That was a b-boy. The term earthbound in the 50s was used to describe a person who was, is that someone who's not smart, something like an alien on Earth, out of place, or does that mean they were reliable? If someone was earthbound in the 50s, that meant they were reliable. If a person said they're frosted in the 50s, this means does that mean they're angry? Does it mean they were drunk? Or does that mean they were freezing cold? If someone was frosted, that meant they were angry. In the 60s, if you want to call someone a snitch, you could also call them a sweet, a fink, or were they fat with a PH? In the 60s, if they were a snitch, you could call them a fink, maybe even a rat fink. If you want to pick the best possible option, are you going to cherry pick something? Are you going to tool with the options? Or are you going for the skinny? If you're picking the best possible option, that meant you were cherry picking something. In the 70s, if all is well, you'll say you're sound as a pound, sound as a round, or sound as a hound. If all is well, and it's the 1970s, something could be sound as a pound. In the 80s, what other way could you say you're relaxing at home? Are you wigging out? Are you blazing? Or are you cold lamping? If you're at home and you're relaxing, and it's the 80s, you're cool lamping or cold lamping. What is another way to say that you find something disgusting during the 1980s? Is it jive turkey? Would you say barf me out? Or big tickle? Something disgusting, and it's the 80s. Ugh, that barfs me out. Go bent is a 1950s phrase used to say, drop dead, have fun, great dancing. Which one of those? go bent in the 50s. That's a phrase used to say, drop dead. Another word for a cold drink used in the 1940s is quenchers, noms, or nosh. Which one of those is a cold drink in the 40s? That would be quenchers. If someone is a smooth talker during the 50s, it would have been called an apple butter, a blanket, or a fat city. If someone's a smooth talker, they would be smooth as apple butter. It's smooth. If you're casting an eyeball, this means you're wanting to start a fight, looking at something quickly, or are you starting to cry? If you're casting an eyeball, that means you're looking at something quickly. To be nostalgic for another decade, you're thinking about the new millennium, the golden oldies, or the flip side. If you're thinking about another decade in the past and you're thinking of the golden oldies. Stop digging in my Kool-Aid. This means you should share your food. Or does it mean you should stop touching my things? Or does it mean mind your own business? Stop digging in my Kool-Aid means to mind your own business. Square biz, that means we are in agreement, leaving the event quickly, or does that mean we're sharing a meal? If we're square biz, that means we are in agreement. In the 80s, if you call my homeboy or homegirl, if I call you my homeboy or homegirl, that means we don't know each other, we're friends, or does that mean we're enemies? If you call someone your homeboy or homegirl, that means you're friends. Going postal is an 80s version way of saying you're uncontrollably angry, you don't know each other, or does that mean, don't know each other? I got a 50-50 on this one. Going postal means you are uncontrollably angry. True or false, saying you're wally wally, blood and dolly over someone, it means you're wild about them and cannot see any faults. Is that true or is that false? That is true. Wally wally, blood and dolly. I'm going to agitate the gravel. That means you're driving the car fast, starting demolition on a project, or starting a physical fight. What does it mean you're going to agitate the gravel? That means you're driving the car fast. We're going to bounce. This means you're leaving? Or does it mean you're having a great time? Or does it mean you're starting a relationship? We're going to bounce. That means you are leaving. Another way to say obviously or duh is no doy, flutterbum, or far out. To say something is obvious or duh, you might say no doy. That is mondo cool. That means something is not cool at all, very cool, or does that mean it's trying too hard to be cool? If something is mondo cool, that means it's not cool at all. If you're giving advice to someone to shoot low during the 50s, this means be careful, be loud and obnoxious, or slash someone's tires. What does it mean to shoot low? That means be careful. Don't have a cow. This means don't get upset. Or does it mean don't eat too much? Or perhaps it means don't be rude. Don't have a cow. That means don't get upset. In the 1950s, wazoo was another word for an instrument, the rear end, or an alcoholic drink. If something was up the wazoo, that would be another word for the rear end. The derriere. You get it. Question 100. In the 80s, the word hellacious was used to describe something. Was that cool or exciting, extremely bad, or annoying or aggravating? In the 80s, if something was hellacious, that means it was extremely bad. And that was question 100. Thanks for playing Quiz Time. Don't forget to drop your score in the comments, please. Like, subscribe, ring the notification bell so you never miss Quiz Time when it comes out. Again, thanks for playing. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.